Welcome back to the Behind the Well Show. I'm your host, Roger Abel, back with Elias Randall. It's been a pretty fun week in the markets this week, Elias. You know, we just so listeners know, we typically film these shows a week or two ahead of time, and Monday was an exciting day.
Yeah, it was. Yep. Friday. Monday was there's a lot of selling going on, but then since then, the market's kind of rebounded a little bit. So
yeah, I think what's really interesting is, I guess, what's today's date? Today's the 8th. It would have been, the 2nd of August, Friday. An unemployment number came out that was unexpectedly poor, and it caused the 10-year yield to go down to about 3.6%. It was a pretty massive drop, but now we're here at the end of the week, and we're hovering around 4, so it's just been a really chaotic time in the market. And I think anytime this happens, people just get a little paralyzed and a little fearful of what's going to happen. And I think it's good to maybe just chat a little bit today about past history, what happens during bull markets, because arguably we're back in a bull market. I understand it's easy to get complacent and think that things are always going to go up, but at some point there's going to be volatility as the market continues to grow. We've never had a market that just goes straight linear for, a dozen straight years.
we have not. And really, so I think it's always a good reminder that short-term events really shouldn't dictate your investing strategies. And it might be a tough pill to swallow at times, but 10 to 15% correction in the stock market is normal. Does it feel good? No. It's a poke in the eye, but it's still normal trading activity within a 12-month period, right? So I think it's easy to get excited, and personally, I fall into that trap too, right? Okay, big sell-off. I start to get worried, just like everyone else, but you got to remember that controlling the things you can control is going to be more important. And the thing I love, so what does everyone do? Okay, we turn on CNBC, right, because we want to know what's going on. And they got the huge red graphic with the big bear growling, market sell-off, market sell-off. But then the next day, the market could be up 1.5% or maybe even close to 2%. You don't see the big flashing green, bull that's growling at everyone. So sometimes you got to take the events with, I'm not saying don't educate yourself on what's happening, but educate yourself on what's happening, but still be a successful investor and do what successful investors do.
I think one of the things that it highlights for us, and specifically how we do this, is I had a meeting with, two things. Monday morning, a friend of mine called and said, "Hey, I bet this is going to be a fun day for you." Because overnight, when I woke 5 o'clock, I checked the futures, and the NASDAQ was down like 6.8%.
Oh, great.
I'm like, this is going to be fun. And my buddy who called me used to be a trader. He traded Treasury futures, and he's like, "Oh, this is going to be a fun day for you." I'm like, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Well, your phone's probably going to be ringing." I'm like, probably not. And we went through the entire day. We had one individual call, and I was on my computer. I said, "Hey, Elias, can you call this person back?" And I had just assumed it was a market-related question. Well, it turned out to be they needed some money for a wedding. So we didn't receive a single call on Monday. And I had a new individual that I onboarded yesterday ask me, why weren't people calling? Weren't they scared? And I said, well, I believe the reason people weren't calling is they have a very good understanding of why they own the portfolio they own. They understand why they have a 60 or 70 or 80% stock portfolio, because it provides them the highest probability of success in retirement. And that actually helps them drown out the noise of what should I do? Well, going to cash is detrimental because I'll demonstrate to you that your probability went down or whatever it may be, but they have purpose to their investing. I think anybody listening to this show, the takeaway is figure out how to put some purpose behind your investing. Making more money, that's not a goal. Why do you want to make more money? How much risk do you need to take to, spend X amount a month in retirement or get to your lake house or the farm you want to buy or whatever it is? Just put some goals behind your money. And I think that's really when you become less emotional about the market. You understand why you own a portfolio. You understand that there's going to be ups and downs. And I think part of it, we've done a good job of educating, the individuals that we work with, that markets are going to be volatile. It's going to go down. I don't know when. We're not going to time it, but we're going to put you in a position where, hopefully your account doesn't go down as much.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting you bring that up. So I was having a conversation with a football officiating colleague of mine who's also his real job. He's a pastor, but we officiate football together sometimes. And he was asking me about like the challenges of our career, and he was asking me about the investing and the money. And I made the comment. I said, the investing's really not the challenging part. It's managing the expectations and the emotions of clients through chaotic times. And I do think we have done a good job. And I thought it was kind of interesting because he said, so he actually made the comment, he goes, so really our jobs aren't that much different. He goes, a lot of what I do is managing expectations and emotions because he's a pastor, right? So people are coming to him for that type of guidance. So I think he thought that was really interesting. And I think a key takeaway from these type of things are the short-term events, I don't think are that relevant for them. And I think they know what they're going to say. Oh, there's this going on. Should we make a change? Well, the only reason we would make a change is if we need to set you up for a better outcome. Well, and if that's not what we're doing, then there's no reason to make a change.
And it's how we positioned it. We haven't positioned this as making more money than the stock market. We haven't positioned this around performance. Because truth be told, whether you own, XYZ mutual fund at firm A and the same XYZ mutual fund at firm B, the returns are the same. The returns aren't different between firms. The strategy and how you get there is different. I met with a couple here just a couple of days ago. Their exact reason they were here, we want a more tailored approach to what we're doing. They had good mutual funds. Like, that's what they own. They own good mutual funds bought from a good firm. They like their advisor. They just didn't feel like it was a tailored approach for them.
I don't know how much more. I don't know what they're currently doing, but if I know the families that work with Premier, I don't know how more tailored it could.
Well, they're working with a different firm, but they said to me, they're like, well, where are we going to make more money? I said, you're going to make the same both places. I said,
you didn't say here?
No, because it's not true. Think about it. And I broke it down. I said, okay, if you have a 70% stock portfolio here, and you have a 70% stock portfolio there, fees are similar, all things held equal, you should return about the same. Yeah, there is going to be slight differences in performance based upon how it's allocated. If one person underweight international or overweight, but all things held fairly equal, it should be the same. And he never really thought about it like that. He goes, oh yeah, when you say that, it's right. Like, he owned a dividend fund. I said, that dividend fund in that account or in this account is going to make exactly the same. Performance isn't better. It's the same, unless it's allocated differently. It's all about how you get someone from point A to point B to understand why they own the investments, why it's in their best interest to own those investments. And that's where you get the alpha or the increased benefit from an advisor from firm A to firm B. It's not typically you're going to make more money. And we always tell people this. If someone tells you you're going to make more money, the only way to do that is more risk.
More risk. And that's, to me, that's a giant red flag. Someone actually asked me the other day, what are, for you, if you were going to interview, it was a really good question that not a lot of people have asked, but they basically asked me, like, if you were going to interview investment firms, what would you ask? Or what would be the red flags or something? And I said, any talk of performance or outperformance. I just don't believe consistently over time anyone can outperform. So I don't think that's a realistic expectation to go into. So for me, that would be if I was meeting with you and you said, if you move your money here, we're going to outperform, immediately I'm red flag. Like I'm already thinking of doing something
Think
else.
about this. Okay, let's say the S&P 500 averaged 10% a year. And you outperformed and averaged 10.5 or averaged 11. So you did 1% more. Most people are be like, well, that's not really that much. That's not relevant, right? Realistic, that's what
people
they'd
would
say.
probably say that.
They'd be like, oh, yeah, it's only 1% more. That's 10% better than what the S&P 500 did. That's massive outperformance. If someone can outperform the S&P by 1% every single year, I would call that massive outperformance. And very few people have done. If you look at the track history of mutual funds that outperformed their benchmark, It's very slim number have. Yeah, there's been some funds out there that have done it, but very few have. And then if you go start looking at the risk they took, likely there was a little bit more risk to it.
Right. And right. And then the next question is your appetite for risk even appropriate to try and achieve that?
Yeah. If you're chasing performance, you're setting yourself up for failure. You got to figure out, why do I own these investments? And, where's it going to take me to get to where I want to go? And it just makes me think about what we really do for people is help put strategy behind what they're doing. And one of the questions I got asked the other day, and it came to thought because I saw an MSN article about this too, but paying your house off early. And we work with a lot of folks that listen to Dave Ramsey. We've worked with these people for a long time. And Mr. Ramsey believes you should try to pay your house off early if you can. If you're saving your 15% and you're out of debt, you should start knocking the house out early. And this couple, they're 7 years from retirement. They have 20 years left on their mortgage, and their interest rate's 3.375%. Okay. They owe 116, and they have $230,000 of cash in the bank, earning 5%. And they said, should we pay our house off? I go, yep, you should pay it off. And they go, but why? We're making more. I said, you're making more now. You likely won't make that for the long term, number one. And then they brought up the old adage of, well, we need the tax deduction. I'm like, you don't need the tax deduction. You're still paying to get a deduction. And I told them, I said, having a paid for house, it's a risk mitigation factor. Their payment was like $1,600 a month, right? Well, how much money does somebody have to invest to generate $1,600 of monthly income?
Probably at least 500,000 in the ballpark.
Yeah, 500,000. So you want to save up another 5, or you just want to pay off the 116 and free up the cash and have more tools to build up that $500,000 investment. But I think people always wonder, hey, why should I do this? And I don't believe there's a one size fits all for everybody. And I told them, I said, if you're not comfortable writing the check for $116,000 to pay this off, I understand. But you're 7 years from retirement. Let's at least put together a plan that pays it off by the time you retire. And that made sense to them.
That is, and that's reasonable, because the real strategy should be something from paid off today to have it paid off by retirement. And that's, to me, the paid off house, that's more of a question of, one, mitigating your risk, and then two, how it makes you feel.
Yeah.
Like if you're so numbers oriented that you just can't stand the thought of paying off that low mortgage, okay, well, maybe we can start to craft an argument that's maybe not for you, but I still can almost always convince people or bring a very good argument to the table that by retirement it should be paid off, because then there's less risk in your life. And I've met very few people who are retired that risk is something they're hungry for, right? Like they're typically in their 60s. They want to travel, spend time with their family. Like, they've accumulated the wealth they have. They're to the point where let's not blow up the situation. We've already been successful. Let's continue being successful.
So, okay, let me throw this out, because I have a situation that's happened in. Okay, you don't have your house paid off when you're retired. You're 67 years old. You've got 20 years left on this mortgage.
What would I start to talk about?
What would you talk about? I'm going to tell you about a situation I had. And actually, so let me level set this situation for you. Husband and wife, retired in their late 60s. I think one was like 70, one was 67. I mean, not a lot of cash flow, okay? And of all the people I've ever worked with in my career, best budgeters. I mean, to the dollar, they know what they're spending. They came in here, and they're like, we just can't figure out how to get any more money. Like, our budget's so tight, we can't do anything. They got a 15-year mortgage. That's what they're doing, because people have told them they need to have a 15-year mortgage, so they had a 15-year mortgage. What do you tell these people?
Okay, so 15-year mortgage.
They're 70, no extra money, and they're trying to pay their house off in 15 years.
Right.
And this is 2018, 2019, so before interest rates went up.
Yeah. So the simplest thing, you need to refinance into a 30-year mortgage and get less of a payment to ease your cash flow.
That's
and
exactly what I told them.
Right. And they're going to come back with, well, but we want this paid off in 15 years. So it's a harsh reality. If you're 70 and have 15 years left on your mortgage, you're never going to own your house with this cash flow situation, right? They're having a hard time making ends meet. So do you want to live the next 15 years stressing over your budget, or do you want to live the next 15 years renting your house from the bank and living a little bit of lifestyle that you can live?
So I like that answer. So here's the exact scenario I worked through with them. Their option A was to sell their house and rent. Well, the place they were going to rent was half the size, and it was like $500 or $600 less than they were paying. But I mean, it was like a small little place.
But then that cost is also not fixed. They can raise the rent on you anytime.
So that was option A.
Okay.
Option B, just keep doing what they're doing. Option C was exactly what I told you. And I go, hey, look, when we did the refinance numbers for them, and we don't do mortgages, I referred them to somebody, they saved $600 a month. $600. And she goes, are you kidding me? And I said the exact thing you did. I said, so you're going to pay this off for your kids who inherit it? Because mortality's 85, right? Let's call it 85 or somewhere around there.
Right. So this paid off house never did you any good.
The husband passed away 5 years later after they refinanced. So they'd still be struggling to pay this house off.
Right.
Instead, they locked in a 3% rate. Like, that's where you can't just take blanket investment advice and apply it. And I think what I like to talk to people about in retirement, if it's not paid for, you have more than 10 years and you're 70, you're renting your house. You just don't know it. Like, just refinance it, lower your rent payment. You're renting your house. It's okay. You don't have to have it paid for if it's not paid for. My parents retired. I made it be a goal that 10 years out, we said, hey, how do we figure out how to get this paid off so that when you're retired, we don't have this payment? And my folks, if they wouldn't have had a paid for house, they wouldn't be retired. My dad would be stressing out too much about it. And that's not good this just is what it is. That's our personality, because they're, very, very cautious. But I'm sure that gave them some level of satisfaction to say, hey, yeah, we can do this. We don't have any bills. And that's a cool spot to be.
I don't know any successful investors that have no debt and are retired and don't like the situation they're in.
Pretty hard to foreclose on a house that's paid for.
Right.
So I just thought that was some stuff we should talk about, because it's a harder decision right now. Like, so with where interest rates are now, I'm sure that refinance situation for that individual might not have worked.
Where they're at today?
Yeah, I mean,
today. That's possible that might not be favorable.
It just goes
in a different rate environment.
It just goes to some of the value that we add to individuals that had nothing to do with investments. This was all strategy to make sure they could enjoy their retirement, make sure the retirement dollars last as long as they possibly could. And that's why I caution people on just taking blanket advice you read on the internet or someone said you should do this. Go figure out what puts you in the best spot for your household, your family, your spouse. If anybody needs help, you can go to us at btwealthshow.com and we can get you connected with an advisor, start getting a financial plan done for you.
Are you ready to take control of your financial future? The financial professionals at Premier Investments and Wealth Management are the guides you've been looking for. Picture this: a financial plan tailored exclusively to you. Our team of experienced professionals will work closely with you to understand your aspirations and develop a personalized roadmap to get you there. Whether you're dreaming of retirement, buying a new home, or sending your kids to college, we've got the tools to give you confidence in your financial life. We'll help you navigate saving and investing, retirement income, and tax strategies. Our job is not just about making money. It's about helping our clients make smart choices. We'll provide you with the tools and knowledge to confidently steer your financial ship toward a brighter future. Are you ready to embark on your financial journey with confidence? Visit www.btwealthshow.com or click the link in the description of this podcast. Your financial future awaits.
So speaking of Dave Ramsey, he's been popular on MSN lately. So I was reading there's someone called in. So that there is a clip on YouTube, and then there was an article on MSN. So someone called in, young super saver, doing all the right things. And the question was really, when can I start enjoying my money? And I thought that's really relevant conversation and a very relevant question, especially for the super saver investors, because inherently what we kind of run into is they're so focused on doing everything right financially, but they're kind of missing the enjoyment part of the money and the finances in their life. And at some level, money is a tool for a lot of things, right? To build wealth and all that. It can also be a tool to enjoy lifestyle and have fun. So Dave kind of talked through, well, first, which we all know his baby steps, right? You got to prioritize the debt and your savings rate. And I really started thinking about our process and defining I think one of the most important things we've been able to do for the younger, successful families we work with is, what do they need to save to hit their goals, right? Because that number exists out there somewhere. Let's just define what it is. Then what do you want to save? And the extra, if it's you want to upgrade your home or you want to do a couple extra vacations. And I've shared with a lot of folks that, if you're living, which the young families we work with are not living paycheck to paycheck, and no one's entitled to anything, but if you're doing all the right things and your long-term success is, you're on the right path, right? You're on the right path. What is stopping you from having lifestyle items in your life that you really enjoy, right? Because to me, there's a balance of, and I'm never going to be someone that says you can save too much, because I don't really think that's possible, but there's also a balance of saving appropriately and living lifestyle appropriately. I want to get your thoughts on that and your take.
So I think the Dave Ramsey message gets confused sometimes. And I think people believe that if they buy into this philosophy, that they have to pretend like they're poor. Because he talks about living on rice and beans and rice, all that stuff. That's actually not what he says. He says, get out of debt first, right? Emergency fund, get out of debt, save 15% of your check, and have a budget. And if people really look beyond that rice and beans analogy, he'll say right away, you can have a budget. It can be rice and beans or it can be filet mignon. It just needs to be a budget.
Intentional
yeah, you need
budget.
To
know what you're doing.
So I think people hear, Dave's message, and if you listen to most of the shows, yes, there are a lot of people that are calling in. They're in really bad financial shape, and he's, just saying, hey, are you willing to pay the price to get out of debt? But once you're out of debt, nowhere in there does he say you have to live like you're poor. I mean, he had a guy call in the other day, and he wanted to buy a $300,000 car. They said, how much do you make? How much money, how much cash you got? Yeah, okay, buy the car. You should buy it. You're going to buy it anyway. Just write a check for it. He's not telling people to be poor. He's telling people to be responsible with their money so that you don't get into a bad situation. And I think that's lost in the messaging sometimes.
Yeah, I think.
And you know me, Elias, I'm a believer in, I live my life by that. Save what I need to save, and then budget the rest to do the things I enjoy with my family, because, we all have a limited number of years here. What that is, we don't know. And even if you live to be 100, how many of those are quality years?
If you lived, probably 75 of them, 75 to 80.
Yeah, I would say 75 to 80 of those years total. Like, the quality of life deteriorates at some point for most people. And there's also, you mentioned super savers or people that are young and have high incomes. There's also things that you would do or could do in your 40s and 50s that you won't do when you're 65 or 70 and retired. And it has nothing to do with money. It just has to do with probably your physical ability to do it. Like, some of my goals that I want to do. And I just told my wife, I said, are we really going to go do that at 66 years old? The answer is no, right? I have two bucket list items. I want to take a boat from Miami to the Bahamas and Miami to Key West. Like, I want to scratch those off. Do you think I'm getting Meg on a boat at 67 years old? Like, let's go for an adventure and cross the ocean. No.
I feel like you'd be lucky to get her to do it now.
Right. But now convince her when she's 67.
Yeah, that's not good.
It's not going to happen. So I think people should look at some of their bucket list items they want to do and say, hey, if we're in a great financial position, let's just start checking them off now. Do you remember, I think it was last fall, we talked about the vision board? Like how, hey, what's your vision of retirement? Write down what you want to accomplish and start checking things off. So I have a client who actually did that, and they each put 15 things on their vision board.
Really?
And they're like, we've already started checking things off.
Did they have similar? Did they end up with 30 different things, or did they end up with some in common?
I don't know that I don't know that for sure. I know there were some different things, and I think when I talked to them, it wasn't a situation where they thought they had to do all of them together. Just, hey, I want to do this. Let's do it. Focus. Do you remember Focus last year with LPL? We're getting ready to go in a day. Go tomorrow.
Yes, I do remember being there.
What was the name of the kids? Were they from Canada? That came up with the bucket list item. Maybe you didn't go to that.
I don't recall.
They had a documentary about it, and they traveled all over the world. They have a book now, but it was like play basketball with the president. Like, they listed all these things they wanted to accomplish, and they figured out how to do them all. And they eventually got on the court with Barack Obama. It was really cool. It's a great story. I'll have to figure out.
Basketball with the president of the United States?
Yeah.
How do you do that?
They just started networking their way to do all of these things and kept bothering them. And eventually it was crazy. It was called The Buried Life. They were actually on MTV, and it was the 100 things to do before you die. And these guys spoke at LPL's conference last year. But some of the stuff on the list was like, I mean, I could list some of them. One was tell a joke in a late night television show. Streak a stadium. One of them streaked a stadium there on TV.
Streaked a stadium.
Yeah.
That's a poor decision.
Get married in Las Vegas. So they found someone to get married in Las Vegas. Just all these, they came up with 100 things they wanted to do before they died. They jumped in like a little van or bus and just started driving the country, trying to figure out how to accomplish all of these things.
So can I say something? If you're going to streak a stadium, don't do it at an NFL football game. Someone's going to absolutely smoke you if you do that. Like,
I'm pretty sure they did.
You got to do like a soccer game or a baseball. And those guys are going to derail you too because they're professional ball players. But streak a stadium, probably not a great idea. Yeah,
but it was a really good story, and I think they have a book. You should read it, but it's just kind of about how to like bring some life to what you're doing. And, there's all things we all want to do, and we should try to accomplish them. And I think it goes to your original thesis that until you know what you need to do to get to retirement, it's really hard to figure out what you can do with your excess money. So, Elias, I think it just goes to the point of showing that, if you can get to the point where you've paid off your debt, you're saving the right amount, you've done a financial plan to figure out exactly what you need to do to get to where you want to go retirement, then you can start building out this like budget scenario of all the things you want to do. But I think you have to give that purpose too. When we teach classes at the hospitals and the colleges and for individuals, we talk about what's your vision of retirement? Like, you need to have a game plan. And I think that's what's really important. And one thing that's happening too is, the IRS, Secure Act 2.0 has made it easier for people to save and easier for people to accumulate money. There's been a lot of changes in there. And as you start to navigate where you're saving your retirement dollars, you need to have purpose there. And I just got off the phone with one of my friends, Chris, and we were talking about, hey, where someday we want to have a second place. Like, we live in Iowa. Like, we're not staying here in the winter. Nobody in Iowa likes to stay here in the winter. And I'm like, well, I'm putting all my money into Roth right now. Like, all of it. Not like do backdoor Roth IRA, Roth 401k for my wife. And he goes, oh, you're going to California. I go, how'd you guess? Because you avoid the state income tax, right? And we got into this conversation about, some of the stuff that changed in this last legislative cycle is highly beneficial. And one of them is now you can employers can match to a Roth account. So your employer match can go to your Roth.
So I just thought companies just didn't do that.
Well, it just changed.
So it was not allowed.
It was not allowed.
Now it is allowed.
It's allowed, but the employee
So how many
has to pay the
companies
tax.
are going to?
The employee pays the tax on it.
Okay, so
It's
maybe they will
almost
do
like
it.
a conversion, right? Oh, hey, goes there, and then you have to pay the tax. But point is, they're making it easier to save for retirement. We got into the conversation of another thing that changed.
So do you think does the government are they incentivizing paying more taxes now?
Yeah, they are.
Because it seems like the tax deferred accounts are still pretty favorable for the tax situation because you're growing your tax liability over time.
Yeah,
and
unfortunately, they're robbing Peter to pay Paul. They're like, hey, pay it today. Don't let it use compound interest to grow, so we get more and grows into an unknown tax code.
Yeah,
it
put
is
in a
better.
Roth, grow tax free, then they'll change.
But it's better for the individual to get in a Roth most of the time if you're young. Like that's where the accumulated dollars should go. You're paying less in tax today, and we talked about that on the radio show the other night. But for all of the good things they did in here, there's one thing that I think they enacted that is detrimental, and it's not massively detrimental, but still detrimental. And we covered it on a show probably like 4 months ago, but they made it easier. The IRS has made it easier to use your retirement account as your emergency fund.
How so?
Well, they set up a $1,000 emergency. You can take $1,000 out for an emergency now, and they've brought in what it can be taken out for. So before you had to have like a hardship and do a hardship withdrawal. Now you can just take $1,000 out, and if you don't pay it back, you just owe tax on it because it's for an emergency. Avoids a penalty, but you still owe the tax.
Okay, so 1,000. That doesn't even seem helpful.
Well, for some people, though, $1,000 is a lot, and most people don't save $1,000 in an emergency fund. I mean, look at, back to Dave Ramsey. What's the step one? Get $1,000. Get $1,000 in emergency fund. He knows $1,000 isn't helpful. He said that. He knows it doesn't help. The point is that you have a little something, but not enough, so you're really scared that you got to pay all the other stuff off.
Yeah, it is achievable though, but I think the emergency fund, you cannot overlook the importance of an emergency fund because like this situation, why would you want to access any amount of money from your retirement accounts? Okay, even if you can get $1,000 without real consequences other than you got to pay the tax that you're going to pay anyway. But if you're serious about your finance and want to be a good investor over time and build your wealth, like taking $1,000, that's not meaningful. And you should have an emergency fund because things. And I was just yesterday talking with someone about this because I asked them. They came in. They wanted to know what are the basic things someone who's young and getting started out should be doing. Okay, so I got up on the whiteboard, started making the list, and the second thing on there was an emergency fund. So I asked them, if you got laid off today, how long could you live without a paycheck? Ooh, not very long. Okay, well, that's a problem. Now, and maybe you're the type of person that you get laid off and you'll go find work right away. That's not really that relevant. You should be able to live for some period of time that without having a paycheck coming in. That period of time is unique to each person, right? It kind of depends on your career, how easily you could find other employment, and other factors. But if the answer to how long could you live without a paycheck is, I don't know, probably a couple days, that's not good. Because, and here's the other thing, how many times does an emergency happen and it's only one at a time? Like, yeah, that thing that people say it always comes in threes. Every time in my life I've had emergencies, there's three of them. It's like back to back to back. Well, if you have an emergency fund, you can outlast those times. And it's just, to me, it's one of the simple things. That's a simple thing that you can control that really takes minimal effort and minimal thought. And when you have it, that's right. You have an emergency come up, you have the emergency fund. You don't have to stop your savings plan to take care of those things. So I think that's one area. It's not the cool thing to talk about in our business, but it's an important thing. And especially with, we have some signs of slowing economic times. We know there's been layoffs around the country. So how important, everyone that has an emergency fund and was laid off recently, how thankful do you think they are that they were prepared for that?
Very. And layoffs are happening. Intel, 15,000 people they're laying off. 15,000.
Right.
That's a number.
So for not being in a recession, it kind of feels like we're in a recession.
Did you see in Omaha the Kellogg's plant's closing?
I did not see that.
That hit the news yesterday. Place in Des Moines closed. John Deere's laying off. This is early signs of everything's not so great. And if you don't have an emergency fund and you're employed and you have some extra money, now's the time to build it up. Prepare for the worst, hope for the best. Just emergency fund will keep your family going and not put undue stress. Think about how traumatic it is to lose a job and not have a check, but how traumatic is it to lose a job, not have a check, and have no money set aside?
That's scary.
That's scary.
Because then there's you might be looking at losing a car at that point, or maybe even your house will be on the table that's just a lot of bad things can happen, and there's just no reason for it.
Okay, so let's say you go 3 months without a job, and you're 3 months late in your car, you haven't paid your mortgage. Now you got the job, you're not back to even.
Now you
still got to dig out of the hole. So, with that said, if anybody's looking for help getting a financial plan put together, you can get us at btwellshow.com. You can catch us on Facebook, X, and YouTube. I want to thank everybody for listening today, and hopefully you tune in next week.
Securities and advisory services offered through LPL Financial, a registered investment advisor, member FINRA SIPC. The opinions voiced in this show are for general information purposes only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which investments may be appropriate for you, consult with your attorney, accountant, and financial or tax advisor prior to investing. Premier Investments and Wealth Management and LPL Financial do not provide tax advice. Please consult your tax professional. Premier Investments and Wealth Management and LPL Financial do not provide legal advice or services. Please consult your legal advisor regarding your specific situation. Economic forecasts set forth may not develop as predicted, and there can be no guarantee that strategies promoted will be successful. There's no guarantee that a diversified portfolio will enhance overall returns or outperform a non-diversified portfolio. Diversification does not protect against market risk. All performance referenced is historical and is not a guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and cannot be invested into directly. There is no assurance that the techniques and strategies discussed are suitable for all investors or will yield positive outcomes. The purchase of certain securities may be required to affect some of the strategies. Investing involves risks, including possible loss of principal.